We have an enormous treat. I get to engage in conversation with His Excellency Karim Badawi, the Minister of Petroleum and Mineral Resources of Egypt, and he's got a unique perspective from Cairo as the global community responds to this conflict, but builds back in enduring fashion. The wonderful thing about the minister, who's been in his job now 2 years, is 27 years before that with Schlumberger, and all over the world. And so we're going to talk about that unique perspective. Deputy Secretary Danley of the U.S. Department of Energy has given us his regrets. As these things happen, office emergency has come up, and he's very sorry that he's unable to join this conversation. So no one in this audience has to be convinced that energy diplomacy and regional stability are inseparable. We all know that. The Iran crisis, the Strait of Hormuz disruption brought back into focus one of the classic disruption scenarios for global energy security, that a confrontation in a narrow maritime corridor can quickly send global ripple effects through shipping routes, insurance markets, LNG flows, fuel prices, industrial supply chains, and the cost of doing business everywhere in the world. But what this conversation is about is not just crisis response, it's about what moments like this reveal. The need for resilient infrastructure, trusted partners, regional integration, reliable energy systems, energy diplomacy to reduce risk before it escalates. So let me turn to Minister Badawi, and maybe you can just do a scene setter for us. You're very close to the action. You're very close to where everything is happening, but you're not right on top of it as some of the others here have been. How are you? How does this crisis look different from Cairo than it does, say, from Washington and the Gulf? And how is Egypt assessing this moment?
Very good. So thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here. First of all, I would like to maybe highlight that molecules, of gas or of oil, they play a very important role in improving, people's lives, and they play a critical role in terms on impact on the economies and the developments, across the world. And when we look at Egypt today is between 3 different continents. At the same time, Egypt had gone through periods where it was a net exporter, and then, currently Egypt is a net importer. And this is why when we look at this crisis, it really emphasizes the importance of having, a long-term, strategic focus to ensure the resilience, of the energy security, for 120 million people who are living in Egypt. And to be able to do that, this is why we have really kind of set, 6 key pillars, for the Ministry of Petroleum and Mineral Resources, over the last, 2 years, to really kind of set the foundations of priorities for the sector, and that as well, aligning areas of collaboration with partners, because we see very strongly that success can only come through partnership, through collaboration, and through win-win, with whether the various countries in the region, whether with the private sector, which is fundamental to the development of this industry. So those 6 pillars essentially start with the first pillar is how do we provide these petroleum products for 120 million people who are in Egypt, and to be able to do that in the most cost-effective way and in the most sustained way. The focus is on increasing production from our existing fields, and I always say, with proper reservoir management, and at the same time, in terms of focusing on creating an environment which is conducive for increased exploration activity, because exploration activity unlocks further, resources that can be brought into production, right? And this is something which is very, very important. And around that, maybe we'll be able to expand a bit later on, is how we foster an environment which is conducive for our partners, to be able to invest reliably and securely, for the long term, and to make sure that Egypt is highly competitive and provides return to shareholders of the investors, and at the same time provides value, for the country in terms of unlocking those molecules. The second pillar for us, which is very important, is Egypt is blessed with an infrastructure which is very rich, in the oil and gas. We are having an infrastructure in terms of the petrochemical sector, with several, mega, petrochemical, infrastructure which exists in, in Egypt, which play a very important role to be able to, unlock value from molecules, whether in terms of gas molecules, or oil molecules, and provide value-added derivatives, which are important for the local industry growth in Egypt or for exports to other markets in the world. The second also part of our infrastructure is the existence actually also of refinery capabilities. We have 9 refineries, across Egypt, which also play an important role in terms of providing, value-added derivatives and petroleum products that can be used for the local, market, or essentially for, for exports. At the same time, we're having as well a unique infrastructure in the East Mediterranean in terms of liquefying and export terminals for gas. And we have 2 major terminals which are unique in the region, which also enable essentially not only the ability to monetize gas molecules coming from Egypt for export into the global market, but as well to be able to enable those facilities to enable molecules from the Eastern Mediterranean to, from other countries in the Eastern Mediterranean, to be able to make their way to be able to export it to other markets, such as Europe and other in the world. At the same time, we've also, over the last, 1 year and a half, we've also built an infrastructure in terms of FSRUs, for essentially regasification units to enable the flow of additional molecules, of gas to come into the network, from Egypt. And, in terms for us to be able to provide all the requirements that we need for the local market, but as well to make sure that we have all the gas requirements to sustain continued growth for, the petrochemical sector and also the fertilizer sector, which is very important. And the fertilizer industry in Egypt is very rich, and obviously it uses 60% of feedstock from natural gas, and hence the importance for us to create that environment where we can deliver, right, those molecules to grow those industries. At the same time, we also have a unique infrastructure in terms on ports and storage facilities and a pipeline network, right, to move crude across the country, and enabling us to have, the leveraging ports such as Sumid port on the Red Sea, to be able to have, carriers of crude offload for storage, or to be able to transfer crude essentially across, the pipelines within Egypt, and then export, from the Mediterranean ports to other markets, or to be able to deliver crude to the refineries to be able to be leveraged. And on top of that, we're also having a gas network, right, for delivery of gas to all the different sectors, for household, for industries all across Egypt. So essentially, we have this infrastructure, which for us has been very important in terms of how we can enable the full utilization of this infrastructure, not only based on the molecules which are coming actually from Egypt. And this is something, again, which is very important for us, of how we can avail, this infrastructure, and in addition as well to infrastructure of storage, of crude, right, that we do have, to avail it for the different countries within the region. The third pillar, which is also very important for us, and this is something which actually comes hand in hand really with the energy sector, is the mining sector. And this is why also mining is very important. It's our third pillar of focus. Essentially, today mining in Egypt accounts for less than 1% of our GDP, and we're focusing to increase that to 6%. And this is something which is very important because the mining sector will help.
And what are you mining?
So here are various different categories on it. So Egypt, we have gold, we have phosphate, we have silica sands, we have kaolin, we have many different types of minerals. Some also rare earths, minerals, some critical minerals, and this is why we've decided to be able to make that transformation in terms on the mining front, which is not only in terms of extracting raw minerals, but as well in terms on processing and in terms of value-added, industry. We have just initialized the contract to be able to have the first aerial survey, which will be done nationwide. And this is the first aerial survey nationwide since 42 years. And this will use the latest technology to be able to, again, unlock the full potential, of our, mineral, resources, and to be able to set the foundations for, enabling investment opportunities to unlock the potential of the mining sector, and also further collaboration, right, with various countries. The fourth pillar, for us is really focused in terms on how do we work to deliver the optimum energy, energy mix for the country. And I say the optimum energy mix for the country because different countries have different natural resources. And what we've looked to, together with my dear friend and dear colleague, Minister of Electricity and Renewable Resources, Dr. Mahmoud Asmat, we've worked in terms on how do we best leverage, those natural resources so that we can. Egypt has lots of land, lots of sun, lots of wind, and today we have 60% of gas molecules are going towards power generation. And hence, really, we have revised our energy strategy to have actually our energy mix to have 42% to be from renewable energy by 2030. And we're doing this also with a lot of acceleration, going back to your point around also the geopolitical crisis and so forth. The more we can minimize the need in terms of gas molecules for power generation, leverage, the natural resources in terms of land, sun and wind, and hence
if 42% is the goal, where are you now?
So today we are talking roughly around maybe the 12%, from a
that's
from
a big growth
renewable.
then. Yeah.
But essentially we are targeting in terms of having renewable resources so that we have a total of 42%, and at the same time there's also nuclear, also power generation, also projects, right, which will also kind of unlock around also 4.5 to 5 gigawatt as well of nuclear power. And when you look in terms of this energy mix, for us it's important because it unlocks, really, it frees up gas molecules that then can be used either for exports to wherever those molecules can bring, the needs, outside of Egypt, or essentially those molecules, we can actually channel them to the petrochemical sector, or we can channel them to growing the fertilizer, industry, which is very important for food security, not only in Egypt, but as well for the rest of the world. And again, when you look in terms on this, let's say, renewable focus, it will enable us to also provide the foundations for, let's say, the green derivatives as and when they become economically, viable, and where offtake, would become. Then the fifth pillar for us is really focused around the human element, right? Because again, you can have the best of the resources, but without the human element, you cannot really unlock it. And this is why our fifth pillar revolves around the health and the safety of everyone working in the industry across the value chain, how we can ensure that they come safely, to work, and how we can ensure that they can go back home to their families and loved ones, safely. And combined with that, the environment, right? And we believe it's not really an either or. It's also important for us to be able to unlock the potential both from the oil and gas and as well from the mining sector, and with a way to leave also, the climate, for future generations, and to be able to do that in a sustainable way. And along with this, we've also added the energy efficiency. Because we talk a lot about unlocking more molecules and investments and how, and again, crises like this, happening around the world also highlight that every molecule, involved a lot of work and a lot of effort. So we have also to make sure that we integrate, reliable systems for energy efficiency across the value chain, whether we're talking in terms on the operations, on the production, and in terms on the consumption front, in terms of energy efficiency. Last but not least, our sixth pillar is collaboration. And collaboration for us is very, very important because, again, Egypt today, does not have, let's say, the resources in terms of gas, for example, that exist in Qatar, or, for example, of oil that exists, in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and so forth. However, Egypt possesses a unique, actually, location, right, in terms of, between the Middle East, Africa, and, Europe. It connects, the Eastern Mediterranean region and all of the gas molecules, right, in the Eastern Mediterranean. Egypt has a unique, actually, infrastructure with, in terms on the oil and gas front, that I mentioned, whether on the petrochemical front, on the fertilizer industry front, on export terminal fronts, and so forth. And hence, we have an ability to enable other partners to monetize their molecules and to make those molecules avail, where they can bring value. At the same time, Egypt has a growing local market. We have 120 million people. We have a lot of development in terms of infrastructure, in terms of roads, in terms of ports, in terms of storage capacity, in terms of railways, in terms of airports. And hence, essentially, we have the foundations which can help, actually, all our partners to monetize and unlock value from their molecules, whether through a growing local market, whether through a growing local industry where they can deliver value-added derivatives from those molecules, and then provide either offtake within the country or offtake, through exports, and at the same time provide the infrastructure which can help our partners, in the East Mediterranean to have their molecules come to Egypt through the export terminals, and then essentially, have them go to wherever they might be required. So to answer your question, it's Egypt has really focused in terms on how we can really foster collaboration,
right,
to provide value for molecules, whether for oil or gas, not only for the benefit of the 120 million people living in Egypt, but actually in a lot of collaboration for other countries in the Eastern Mediterranean, and as well for investors who are invested, in the Eastern Mediterranean, for future resources.
So I think that's rich insight, those 6 pillars, into how Egypt is approaching things sort of irrespective of crisis. Now on top of this, you have this crisis. And last year when we were here, we experienced Operation Midnight Hammer. And I think back to the conversations at that time, and I don't remember anyone saying, oh, next year this time Iran will have shut the Strait of Hormuz. Did you anticipate anything like this? And then beyond that, how has this crisis affected what you're doing, your pillars? What has proved terrific about that has made you stronger? And where are your vulnerabilities in this kind of crisis?
So I will start with the opportunities, right? And really, the opportunities has been in terms of when I talked about the 6 pillars, essentially is how do we accelerate and how they lay really the foundations for ensuring that we have an investment and we have an environment which is attractive for investment into the country. And this has been very important because, again, when you look at this crisis, what does this crisis demand from all of us? Again, and there's no one country which can do it all, but the whole spirit is that every country have to do whatever it can to have more molecules to be made available, so that actually, molecules availability to the global market, mitigates actually the impact, right, of this crisis. And for us, one way in terms of being able to do that is to really kind of collaborate closer really with our partners, and we have a lot of partners from many of the, from many countries, right? I mean, we have many, American companies, working in the upstream. We have Chevron, we have Exxon, we have other companies such as BP, Shell. We have companies, operating, from the Middle East, such as, ADNOC. We have Arcus. We have Dragon Oil. We have, so essentially, a lot of the different players, right, global players of all different sizes, and ENI, which also plays a vital role as well, in terms of Egypt. How we can really help to have an environment where they are incentivized to be able to accelerate production from existing fields. And we've looked at this in terms of making sure that we recognize the financial terms, right? To make sure that actually every dollar is actually spent to unlock more molecules and faster. And how we can also accelerate exploration in a way which has both, let's say, the breadth of exploration. You have, let's say, complex deep water, exploration activities, in the Western Mediterranean, right on the Egyptian side, but also of how we can work with our partners to look for, let's say, near field explorations, which is explorations which are near existing infrastructure, which essentially can accelerate the time between, discovery and essentially in terms of first gas, or first barrel of oil. So essentially, how we can leverage the mature infrastructure to accelerate that. The other area, which again, this also, let's say, environment enabled us, is also to realize that collaboration and partnerships, existing ones, are very actually important, and they play a key role. I mean, again, we are very blessed as well in Egypt. We have, for example, our SOMED facility on the Red Sea. The SOMED, essentially, port, facility that we have, essentially is a close partnership, between Egypt and all the Gulf countries, right? And essentially, together, this facility has capability of storage, has capability of pipeline distribution to another facility on the Mediterranean to be able to have, oil flow from the Mediterranean, to other markets. And at the same time, we have actually in this facility of SOMED as well now terminals to be able to have, petroleum products, right, to be able to be entered, whether for the local market or for, again, export, via the Mediterranean. And also we have, FSRUs. Two of our existing, FSRUs are as well, in the SOMED facility. So this existing collaboration has been something that we feel has brought in a lot of value, and to be able to bring, return to all the different parties, and as well vehicles of delivering molecules through different pathways. But as well an opportunity for also new partners that we're also very proud to be working with, such as, for example, with Cyprus. So with the collaboration with Cyprus, this is where, again, we've worked together in terms of looking at, for example, Cyprus had discoveries which were not developed. We have, for example, Aphrodite, field, the discovery from 2011, and was not, yet developed. The Kronos discovery from 2022, not developed. And again, we look together with our friends, in Cyprus, and again here, the very strong also, relationship and collaboration and partnership between His Excellency President Abdel Fattah Sisi from Egypt and also His Excellency President Nikos Christodoulidis, from Cyprus, and how the collaboration between both countries could have a win-win, right, for all parties in terms of enabling Cyprus molecules and discoveries to be able to actually make their way to Egyptian infrastructure, to be able to be exported back to, to markets, in Europe, or to be able to be monetized through the local market. And again, because Cyprus does not have its existing infrastructure, and how we can work together on essentially availability of infrastructure which exists in Egypt. And this also helps investors, because then our partners such as Eni and Total, who are, let's say, partners for the Kronos field, or, Chevron, Shell, for example, for in the Aphrodite field, how they can unlock those molecules with the lowest cost per scuff, because, leveraging existing infrastructure essentially minimizes additional investment required, and hence provides actually the quickest pathway to enable those molecules. So again, when we look at this crisis, it just kind of set the foundation that actually we just need to increase work, in these partnerships, and build in terms on what each of the respective partners can bring in to be able to unlock molecules, which then will have an impact to improve the quality of lives, whether of the people of Egypt, the people, of the other countries and of our partners, and as well to the shareholders of the companies, right, to be able to unlock those molecules.
So we've run out of time, but let me ask you a final question, for a short question and short answer. The two themes that are emerging today are the demand era, that artificial intelligence, among many other factors, you look to your south to Africa and what's going to happen there. There's so much latent demand there. So the demand era, how are you seeing demand growing in Egypt, and particularly, where do you see AI going, data centers, that sort of thing in Egypt? So that's question number one. And number two, if there was one important impact of this crisis on Egypt, we sort of know what the impact was on UAE, Saudi, other places. One impact on Egypt. So those two questions to end this round.
So in terms of data centers require power. And again, so this is why the focus that I discussed on our fourth pillar around the energy mix.
Yep.
This actually plays right into this in terms on how Egypt, we have availability of land, so we have availability of sun, wind, and as well, nuclear, by 2028, 2029, and 30. So hence, essentially, having the renewables to be able to power data centers is something actually that Egypt will play a key role to be able to unlock this, not only for the benefit of Egypt, but as well for the other region. Because as well, there's also an interconnectivity project which is called GREKI, which links actually renewable energy from Egypt to Greece and then into Europe. So when you look at the data center front, a lot of projects are also kind of being looked at actually to be set actually in Egypt. Renewable is there. There's also the availability as well of gas, which will also still be required to balance actually that that energy ecosystem and so forth. As far as how now the crisis really affected Egypt specifically,
yeah,
and so forth, I can tell you that it impacted Egypt obviously in terms on the price of the commodity, in terms of the import, because as I mentioned, when you look at the prior to the crisis, the price of barrel of oil, we're talking around the 61, back in October 2025, it was $61, it was then hovering around the $70. So obviously the crisis has created a higher import bill for the components, right, that we're importing. The same thing in terms of import of cargoes, in terms of pricing, which had also gone from, $11 per MBTU to around, they shot all the way to $20 per MBTU, and now it's a bit kind of, in between. But here, the essential part is that this crisis also kind of had obviously a higher impact on the financial cost for our import bill, but it's also kind of re-energized the acceleration of increasing our local production of our local field, because then that brings down the overall prices down, our net price to be lower, and at the same time also the interconnectivity in terms of pipeline gas is also cheaper compared to LNG cargoes and so forth. So when you look at this crisis, I think it created a little bit of obviously a huge financial burden from the import side, but at the same time, it re-emphasized the importance of the 6 pillars, and it re-emphasized the importance of, accelerating partnership, and also enabling, how we can work with our partners in the region to unlock molecules, not only from the existing fields, but also as well across the Eastern Mediterranean, and how together we can really play a key role to avail Egypt as an energy hub, and to be able to help our partners, whether for storage, for their molecules, right, such as what was mentioned a bit earlier this morning, by Sheikh Nawaf, in terms of having Egypt to be able to play a role to help for molecules, right, from the Gulf to be able to be monetized, leveraged, made available, for the market. And at the same time, Egypt is in the middle as well of the 3 continents, and the Suez Canal provides as well another avenue, right, in terms for cargo ships to be able to make their way, from the Gulf into the Red Sea, and then into the Mediterranean, for global markets or for monetization.
So, Mr. Minister, what a fascinating conversation on what you had already been doing that you now changed, double down on, grow, adjust, the importance of partnerships, the importance of having these pillars in place before any crisis comes along. Very clearly seeing your experience, not just in government, but also these many years as Schlumberger in Egypt, Eastern Med, Middle East, North Africa, Russia, Central Asia, and the United States. So please join me in thanking Minister Badawi.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.